Good morning, guys. Well, as you guys heard earlier, my name is Tim Coressel. I am one of the pastors at Cornerstone Church in South Boulder. And, all right. Man, I am so honored to be here with you guys this morning and to worship with you. I've known Parker and a couple of the other folks from the Pinewood team for a few years now, and I just love hearing about what God is up to in this church. And more than that, I just love hearing about the kind of people that God has gathered in this church. So thanks for having me. It's a blessing to me. And this morning, I want you to know this. I want you to know that Jesus wants you to flourish. And when I say this, I'm not saying that he wishes that you would flourish. I'm not saying that he has like a mere hope that you would flourish. But this is the reason why he came to this earth. In his own words, in John 10:10, Jesus said this. He said, I have come to give that they may have life and life to the full. There's a few other English translations to that verse that I kind of like. So another way to put it is this. He says, I came that they may have life and have it abundantly. And another, my purpose is to give them a rich and satisfying life. This is what Jesus wants for you. This is why he came. And flourishing is what Jesus desires for every person everywhere. And we need to know this. Everyone in this room, nothing disqualifies you from this gift. It doesn't matter where you came from. It doesn't matter what you've done or not done. This is for you. And we're not talking about a life of abundance as the world defines it, right? But rather an abundant life. A deeply satisfying life of wholeness, marked by real joy, marked by real peace, marked by real durable hope, marked by purpose and contentment. This is the abundant life of Jesus. But the reality is, and I have a hunch that you guys already know this, the reality is that this does not describe the kind of life many people are living right now. And the trends that we are seeing in our world today, the trends that we are seeing in our culture today indicate that we're not moving in a positive direction. There's a Dr. Anna Lembke, who is the professor and medical director of addiction medicine at Stanford. She cites a number of reports and studies in her book, a fascinating book called Dopamine Nation, and it paints a very unique and a concerning picture for our culture. So I'm going to share just a few of these things that she reports in her book. The first is this, is that researchers interviewed nearly 150,000 people in 26 countries and found that richer, higher income countries like ours have higher rates of anxiety than poorer, low, middle income countries. And that's referring to, by the way, to the prevalence of a generalized anxiety disorder or an excessive and an uncontrollable worry that affects your daily life. As far as rates of depression go, between 1990 and 2017, the highest increases in new cases were seen in regions with the highest socio-demographic index. We're talking about income, especially North America. Physical pain is on the rise. Researchers asked the following question to people in 30 different countries. During the past 4 weeks, how often have you had bodily aches or pains? And they found that Americans reported more pain than any other country. Dr. Lemke notes she meets with a lot of clients in her own practice. She notes that personally she has seen more patients now than ever who are otherwise totally healthy young people, presenting full body pain despite the absence of any identifiable disease or injury. And the numbers and types of unexplained physical pain has only grown. And then there's happiness. What about happiness? Well, self-reported happiness has shown a downward trend in the United States since 2008. In fact, the most recent World Happiness Report, this is a really fascinating report. I don't know if you guys are familiar with this. This is something that's been released for a number of years now, every 1 to 2 years. There's the UN is behind putting this together, but this report, it surveys more than 140 countries, and for the first time time ever the U.S. has dropped out of the top 20. We're now at like number 24 or something. And this is largely attributed to the poor happiness scores of people under 30 years old. In fact, if this report were isolated to just people under 30, the U.S. would be ranked 68. But you would think, we hear all this, and you would think that our culture in particular would be the best position to flourish. Think about this for a second. We live in a time of unprecedented wealth, unprecedented freedom, and technological progress and medical advancement. And so why do we seem to be unhappier and in more pain than ever? And how is it that the generation with the most access and involvement with mental health care remains the most anxious and the most distressed and the most unhappy, with that trend only worsening? Why aren't we flourishing? On paper, it looks like we have everything we need to be the happiest people on this planet. Not only now, but in history. Now, there are, of course, a few underlying issues to this problem, and while I simply don't have the time to address all of them in one message with you today, what I want to do is I want to talk to you what I believe to be one of the most significant of those. And it can be summed up in a word. It's an ancient Greek word. It's the word telos. And this is a word that we find in a number of places in the New Testament of the Bible. It literally means end. But it's often used to describe like a final destination or like an end goal. It's the one thing you are aiming at above all else. And so we might be able to say that the telos of war is victory. We might be able to say that the telos of a business is profit. But human life has a telos. Thomas Aquinas was a 13th century Dominican theologian and philosopher, and he describes telos as the goal of existence. It is the ultimate aim and objective of your life, of your existence here on earth. The thing that you are pointing your life at above all else. That is your telos. And so the issue is that we have become a people shaped by a misplaced telos. Dr. Anna Lemke, who I quoted moments ago, said this. She says, the reason we're all so miserable may be because we're working so hard to avoid being miserable. So the telos of many in our world today has become simply to not feel bad. That's my goal. That's my objective. And so to state it the other way, to just feel good. I just want to feel happy. That's it. Now, can I just pose the question, what's wrong with that? I mean, I'm willing to bet that if I just kind of like ballparked a number, like a rough estimate, somewhere around 100% of us don't want to feel miserable. Am I right? Can I get a witness on that? I mean, we want to be happy. If I had the option, I'd choose feeling good. That's my vote every time. But what we've done is we've taken like this perfectly normal, perfectly healthy desire and want, and we've turned it into an ultimate objective for our life. It is the target we are shooting for. We've made it a means for our survival, a reason for existing. If I don't have that, I have nothing. You see, our life, it needs to be shaped by a telos that is properly placed. And that's what I want to talk to you about for the next few minutes. And there are two important elements of a healthy, properly placed telos. The first, I call it looking up. A properly placed telos means looking up. It is a life that is shaped by a dedication to something bigger than you. And so what I want to do with you right now is I want to share a few passages from Scripture with you, 3 of them, all conveying the same theme or pattern. And what I want to do is, as we quickly read through these, I want to see if you can pick up what that theme and that pattern is. And what I want to do is I just kind of want to set the precedent of this is what the Scripture says. Again and again and again, all right? So our first one is this, Colossians 3, 1 through 2. It says, "Since then you have been raised with Christ. Set your hearts on things above, where Christ is, seated at the right hand of God. Set your minds on things above, not on earthly things." 2 Corinthians 4:18 says, "So we fix our eyes not on what is seen, but on what is unseen. Since what is seen is temporary, but what is unseen is eternal." Lastly, 2 Corinthians 5:15, "And he died for all, that those who live should no longer live for themselves, but for him who died for them and was raised again." Do you see it? You and I were made for more than ourselves. That's what that means. The aim and objective and purpose of your life is intended to transcend you, to point beyond you. What your life is about must be bigger than your own happiness. What your life is about must be bigger even than your own health, even than your own wholeness. You see, Jesus, he wants you to flourish, but there's a twist. Because if you make flourishing your end game, your ultimate pursuit, then you will actually find yourself further from it. Viktor Frankl, the Austrian psychiatrist and Holocaust survivor, he put it this way in his book, Man's Search for Meaning. He said, "Don't aim at success. The more you aim at it and make it a target, the more you are going to miss it. For success, just like happiness, cannot be pursued. It must ensue. And it only does so as the unintended side effect of one's personal dedication to a cause greater than oneself, or as the byproduct of one's surrender to a person other than oneself." And so flourishing, joy, happiness, a satisfying life, these are not big goals for us to achieve. It is what occurs in our life as a kind of byproduct when our telos, when our goal and our pursuit and our aim is properly placed. So more specifically, when our heart, when our mind is dedicated to something bigger than us, when we look up. And the idea is a simple one. I mean, a hyper focus on yourself will not get you where you want to go. And the psychology textbooks tell us this. We know this, that if a person obsesses or dwells on their own anxiety or on their own depression or trauma or distorted thoughts, it'll actually make that person feel worse. But the solution is not just to start fixating on your own health and your own wholeness and your own happiness. That's actually not the right solution, because the underlying issue will remain the same, which is that your locus of attention is still you. I'm still thinking about me. That's the core issue. Now, of course, thinking about your life is obviously an important thing to do. It's an impossible thing not to do. In fact, to flourish, a person does need to spend some time reflecting on their own life, evaluating how they are doing, and we need to consider our personal daily rhythms and practices, right? Because that all makes a difference, how we feel and how we're experiencing life. This is great. We should do it. But when this becomes the thing, when this becomes the thing that you live for and the primary pursuit of your life, when it becomes the thing that takes up the most real estate in your mind and in your thought life, then the very health and the wholeness and the contentment that you seek, it will elude you. And this has something with the way that God made you. This is by design. As I said earlier, God, he does care, and he does like to see you healthy. He does like to see you happy. He does like to see you feeling good. Some people that I have met have this belief that I don't think God even wants me to feel happy. No, he does. He likes to see that. But it is not the purpose for your existence. He made you for something more than that. Better than that. He made you first and foremost to know him, to be in union with him, to experience communion with him. Thomas Aquinas, who I mentioned earlier, stated that the ultimate end of man and humanity's ultimate good consists in knowing God. And so the power of fixing our minds and our hearts on him is that when we do that, we can actually begin to see that there is actually a bigger story being written in this world by the author of life, a magnificent story that God has written you into. A life of meaning, a life of purpose. And it is only then when we see that and we choose to participate in it that happiness and health and flourishing will follow. But we cannot see this bigger story that the author of life is writing if our attention is just fixed like this, in on ourselves. Because the story's bigger than this. Psalm 37:4 says, "Take delight in the Lord, and he will give you the desires of your heart." There's the Passion Translation. I love the way that it states this verse. Let's put that up there. It says, "Make God the utmost delight and pleasure of your life, and he will provide for you what you desire the most." Make him the utmost delight. Okay, so what do we desire the most? I think if we were to ask somebody like Viktor Frankl, if he were still alive, what we desire most, he would say, without hesitation, meaning. That's what the human heart desires. I mean, he said that the most powerful motivation of the human heart is the drive to find meaning in life. And we can begin to find it by looking up outside of ourselves to him. Jesus is the origin of meaning in our life. After surviving the Nazi concentration camps, Viktor Frankl immigrated to the United States to practice as a psychiatrist. He developed this new kind of therapy called logotherapy, which is about experiencing healing through finding meaning in life. And he began to work with people here in the United States with suicidal tendencies. And in doing so, he recognized actually a similarity between them and the prisoners that he knew in the death camps. They appeared to have lost hope. But it was largely because they had lost a connection with a greater meaning and purpose in life. And he recalled the men in his camp who argued that they, quote, they had nothing more to expect from life. And so the challenge for him was to show them that life was still expecting something from them. And he believed that if you knew the why for your existence, you can bear almost any how. And if you think about it, and we don't have to think very hard, the kind of life we live here couldn't be more different than a life of someone suffering in a concentration camp. I mean, just think about the kind of autonomy and independence we have in our culture, the freedom to be really whatever we want, the access to comfort and pleasure and convenience and opportunity, and yet somehow people are still reporting that they are suffering and in pain, and they are coming to the exact same conclusion. There is nothing more that I can expect from life. And this is precisely what Frankl was getting at, and one of the quotes he is most well known for is this: "Evermore, people today have the means to live but no meaning to live for." The narrative that our culture is force-feeding us today, especially those under 30 years old, is that you can and should do just whatever makes you feel best. You deserve to make your happiness and your well-being the ultimate good of your life. You should be the center of your life. It's a message that they say it promises greater freedom, but it's ruining people's lives. It's robbing people of a full life. Do you remember that opening statement from Jesus a few minutes ago, right? So he says that I've come to give you life and life to the full, where there's context to that. The thing that he said right before that is that there is a thief, and the thief comes only to steal and to kill and to destroy. And this narrative is robbing us blind of the joy and the satisfaction and the flourishing that Jesus came to give us. And not only has this terrible idea spread and taken root in our culture, but now we have the resources, we have the wealth, we have the freedom, and we have the technology to supercharge this idea and narrative and this pursuit. And so it makes sense that we are getting miserable at an incredible scale. Because you and I were made for more. We're made for more than all of that. We're made for more than all those empty promises that the world is offering us. There is a bigger story that is still expecting something from us. God has written you into his story to make a difference in this world, in this community, in your neighborhoods, in this church, in your schools, in your places of work. And some of you, maybe even in other countries in this world. He is calling you to a life of eternal significance that makes an eternal impact in the lives of the people around you. There is a bigger story for you. And so what is that? What is the bigger story that you are living for? What is the bigger story that the author of life is inviting you to participate in? Is there a cause that is bigger than you that you have felt moved to dedicate yourself to? And how can you resist closing in on yourself and instead start looking up? Now, I had said that there are two important elements of a properly placed telos in our life. So there's looking up, a dedication to something bigger than you. But the second is this. It's called pouring out. That your life should be shaped by a commitment to serving someone other than you. And so Scripture tells us that God's ultimate desire for you and for me is to be conformed to the image of his Son, Jesus. In other words, to become like him. God desires to shape your life to look more like that of Jesus, because in him we can see the original and an intended shape of humanity. It's what we were meant to look like, how we were meant to live. And so that means by knowing and following Jesus, we become more fully human and more truly human. He is both the example and the roadmap of human flourishing. And so I think it makes sense for us to consider what kind of example and map that he left us. How did he live his life while he was here on earth? Well, here it is. I'm going to share with you a few more passages. And again, I want you guys to look at these and try to see if you can pick up the theme and the pattern here. And by the way, this is like a small sampling of what we see throughout Scripture. Mark 10:45 says this, "For even the Son of Man did not come to be served, but to serve, and to give his life as a ransom for many." Philippians 2:5-8 says, "In your relationships with one another, have the same mindset as Christ Jesus, who being in the very nature of God, did not consider equality with God something to be used to his own advantage. Rather, he made himself nothing." Another way to say that is he emptied himself. He made himself nothing by taking the very nature of a servant, being made in human likeness, and being found in appearance as a man. He humbled himself by becoming obedient to death, even death on a cross. And the last one, Matthew 16:24-25. "Then Jesus said to his disciples, 'Whoever wants to be my disciple must deny themselves and take up their cross and follow me. For whoever wants to save their life will lose it, but whoever loses their life for me will find it.'" Are you beginning to see what the roadmap is to a full and abundant life? Jesus is telling us that the entry point to that full life is the cross. We have to travel through the cross to receive the full life that Jesus is talking about and wants us to and has come to offer us. It's a life that is preceded by a death. And the death that we're talking about in this case is the death of self. And that practically, what does this look like in just like daily life? Practically, this looks like removing yourself from the center. It looks like self-denial. It looks like pouring your life out to others. It looks like giving your life away for others. It looks like moving from a what's in it for me mentality to a what can I do for others. It means that self-interest is no longer the reigning authority of my life. It means that I will no longer just do whatever I feel like doing at the moment I feel like doing it. It looks like moving from a posture of scarcity to a posture of generosity. This is where we will find the abundant life of Jesus. Just look at the words of the Apostle Paul. He's writing to a young pastor named Timothy who's leading this new church with new Christians. And this is what he said, some encouragement to him. He says in 1 Timothy 6, 18 through 19, it says, "Command them to do good, to be rich in good deeds." All right? Don't just be rich in worldly wealth, be rich in good deeds, and to be generous and willing to share. In this way, they will lay up treasure for themselves as a firm foundation for the coming age. And get this, so that they may take hold of the life that is truly life. Which means there is a life that you can live in this world that is not truly life. We want to take hold of a life that is truly life. It is full. It is meaningful. It is eternal. It is significant, and it's making a difference. And you can take hold of the life that is truly life through a posture of generosity and pouring yourself out. In 1952, Albert Schweitzer received the Nobel Peace Prize for what was called a reverence for life. And he was a theologian, he was a pastor, a musician, and a physician. And he moved to Lemba-Rene, a French colony in Central Africa, and he did so as a medical missionary where he would open a hospital that would grow into more than 70 buildings, able to serve 500 people at one time. And for that time, that was like crazy. It was said of him that at Lemba-Rene, Schweitzer was doctor and surgeon in the hospital, pastor of a congregation, administrator of a village, superintendent of buildings and grounds, writer of scholarly books, commentator in contemporary history, musician, and host of countless visitors. Not to mention he was a friend of Albert Einstein and quoted by Viktor Frankl in his work regarding logotherapy. This guy did some stuff. Now, I don't always like using examples like that because like when I hear examples like that, I'm like, dude, like, are you trying to compare me to that guy? Like that guy's doing like a crazy amount of stuff. But listen to this. In 1935, Albert Schweitzer was invited to give a speech at a school to kids in England called Silcote School. It's a school that's still around. So he's giving this speech to kids, and he decided to speak to the kids about what they ought to look for in life once they are done with school. Especially those who are eager to make a big splash with their life, to do some big stuff. And the whole speech is awesome, but I'm going to read a short excerpt, all right? He tells them, seek a humble sort of thing. Our hearts often look for something very big, something wanting a lot of sacrifice, and often our heart does not see the humble things. At first, you must learn to do the humble things, and often they are the most difficult to do. In those humble things, be busy about helping someone who has need of you. See somebody alone? Try to be with him. Try to give him some of the hours which you might take for yourself, and in that way, learn to serve, and then only will you begin to find true happiness. I don't know what your destiny will be. Some of you will perhaps occupy remarkable positions. Perhaps some of you will become famous by your pens or as artists, but I know one thing. The only ones among you who will really be happy are those who have sought and found how to serve. Isn't that good? Okay, here's what I love. Here's what I love about what he's saying and the spirit of what he's saying. Is it helps us see that giving yourself away and serving others can be a lot more simple than you might imagine. He calls it the humble things. But making a difference in the life of someone can happen from taking a very small, very simple, very humble step. Like being present with someone who feels alone. Sending a text message to check in on someone to let them know, like, hey, you're being thought about right now. Finding a simple way to let somebody know, like, dude, I see you. Like, you belong here. Taking time out of your day to just help somebody who needs help with something, anything. You know, there are some people that don't have anybody to help them with anything. Check in on somebody that you know or maybe have heard is going through a difficult time. Volunteer to serve. Just find someone, somewhere to generously give yourself to offer the time and the talents and resources that God has given you. You know, the first time that I ever did this was at Cornerstone Church here in Boulder. I started attending there in 2005 when I was a 21-year-old college student, and I was deep in that season of life where you think a lot about what you want to do with your life, or you wonder a lot about what your purpose is. You stress about making the right moves and decisions to set your future up for success. Basically, it was a time in my life when I was thinking a lot about myself, a lot about my life. And I was in church service one Sunday morning, and I was there with my wife, Lindsay. We were dating at the time, and there was this announcement that day that our kids' ministry had a huge need for volunteers teaching in kids' classes. And I distinctly remember sitting in that chair, hearing that announcement, thinking to myself, I will not do that thing. Not going to happen. Not in a million years. Dude, you know. But Lindsay, my wife, she like basically like sprung up from her seat and front of the line. She's like, I'm going to do this. And on her way back, she looked at me and she's like, you're doing it too. So I got voluntold. Anybody else know what that's like? So, okay, we ended up teaching a class of 4 and 5-year-old kids. I had no clue what I was doing. I don't think I'd ever volunteered a day in my life. I'm not even joking. I think this is the first time, my maiden voyage. And they plopped in my arms like this giant, like 3-ring binder. It was the curriculum, and I was like, oh my gosh. And like on my Saturday nights were completely transformed and overtaken by prepping for Sunday school. I was prepping all these crafts, like cutting and gluing and glittering, just getting ready. And then I'd get to class, and I thought I was like fully prepared, and like this is going to go really great. All right, like, and you can just like feel the naivety. I was like, all right, class, and it's just like chaos would just like explode in the room. 4 and 5-year-old kids. But there was always that sweet moment where I'd get the Dixie cups out, fill them with goldfish. It was like the peace offering of like, just like slide it over. And then it was like the one time during Sunday school where like I got real respect from the kids. Listen to the man. Hey. He's got the cups. I even remember one Sunday where I thought I lost a kid, but turns out he was just hiding under a blanket in the corner. Wild times, you guys. We've learned a lot of lessons at Cornerstone. We train our volunteers much better these days. But, okay, during that whole experience, I did that for a year, something unexpected happened. And it was something that I wasn't even looking for. Something in me woke up. And it was something that I knew wasn't there before. It was small, but it was noticeable. And the best way to describe it, it felt like a flicker or like a spark or a flash of light. You know, when you're trying to like light a fire or light a lighter or something like that. That's what it kind of like felt like inside, but it caught my attention and it felt good. This is new. So after that year with the 4- and 5-year-old class, I asked if I could volunteer in the youth ministry. And again, I had no clue what I was getting myself into. I didn't grow up in a youth group or anything like that. I met Jesus when I was 19. I missed that whole thing. And so I didn't know what a youth ministry even was supposed to look like. I didn't know what a youth leader was even supposed to do. All I knew is that I just wanted to get to know students, and I wanted to show them just how loved they are and show them how much better Jesus is than what the world offers. I didn't really know what to do or how to do it yet, but I did know why I was there, which I think is the most important thing. And I remember when I stepped into that environment to volunteer, that small spark that I described, oh boy, it became a flame. And it was like, I remember like having this like epiphany of like, oh, I see. And it was like, just like that, I was hooked. And by this point, I'm a senior in college, and I decided to bag my entire plan. I'm about to graduate. I had a plan. Like, I was like moving on. I was going to go to grad school, and I was going to become a therapist. I was like, this is the thing that I'm going to do. And then I like started spending time with 4- and 5-year-old kids, and then middle schoolers and high schoolers. And I was like, I got to just trash this whole plan. And I just knew it was like pastoral ministry is where I got to be. Serving and loving young people is where I got to be. And I had never felt more alive and more on fire than just leaning into that little spark, leaning into that, like just like kind of just like out of curiosity, like I don't know what that is, but it's good. I'm just going to take another little step into that. I don't know, it's growing, it feels even better. I'm going to take another little step into that. I don't even know what the end game is. I don't even know like even how to describe it. But I'm going to just keep moving in that direction. That was nearly 20 years ago. And in fact, some of those kids in that 4- and 5-year-old class are now in my young adult ministry at Cornerstone, and I have the honor of being able to continue to pour into them in a whole new level. And that is the coolest thing, I'm telling you, it's the coolest thing. Worship team, you guys are welcome to join me on stage. I'm almost done. Okay, so here's why I tell you this story today. It's certainly not to demonstrate how I'm some sort of like hero or shining example, because that couldn't be further from the truth of what happened. Remember, I didn't even want to volunteer to begin with. It was like a no thank you from me. I mean, my arm was almost literally twisted to start serving. And when I did it initially begrudgingly. And yet, get this, when people ask me, I get this kind of question all the time. When people ask me when I first felt called to be a pastor, that's when I say it occurred. In that little classroom with those little kids on those Sunday mornings that I got voluntold to be in was the origin of what I understood to be a call in my life from God, a bigger story that God was writing, that He was inviting me to join Him in. I never would have even seen the script if I hadn't just said, yes, okay. Not really into it, but okay, I'll do it. I don't know, and I didn't even have like okay, I'll do it if something big happens at the end of it. No. That's missing the point. The point was, yes, okay, this church has a need. These kids need somebody to teach them about Jesus and give them some tasty crackers. Like, I'll be that guy. And you guys, I need you to hear this. This is how kind God is. That at a time when I was so engrossed with my own life and my own future and trying to figure out my own purpose, taking this one tiny little step outside of myself to serve kids once a week was enough for God to use to open my eyes and to see that bigger story, to see just how His kingdom was moving all around me. He was like, just give me a little bit. Just give me just like a tiny little thing. I'll take like this tiny seed of faith. I'll just take this tiny, imperfect, undeveloped seed of faith, and I will turn it into something magnificent. I dare you to trust me. I was so fixated on my own life and my own future that it made it impossible to see it clearly. That's interesting, right? I was trying to see it so hard that it was out of focus. And it was only when I began to look up and only when I began to pour out that my future and my flourishing began to materialize right before me. And it began to grow in my life like fruit. And it began to change my life and change the trajectory of my life. And I have never been the same. And this morning, my prayer is that you too would dare to try looking up and to just take a small, humble step to pour yourself out. Because when you do, I pray that God would begin to open your eyes to see a whole new reality, a new kind of life, a kingdom of life and love and beauty unfolding around you, waiting for you to just step into and receive. And I pray that God would wake something up within you. I pray that he would connect you to the larger story that the author of life is writing in this world and in this community and inviting you to play a role in. Each and every one of us is being invited into his story.